Suspension can be very hard to understand for a lot of new riders, but even people that are more experienced have not exactly dialed in their bike yet. This is why I'm making this video, to help you understand the basics of suspension. Suspension is vital when it comes to mountain biking and any off-road sport, because well, when the terrain gets rough, then you need somehow to track the ground. Without good suspension, professional riders wouldn't be as fast as they are, and not only does it help you gain speed, but also the comfort that it provides as well, which will make you want to ride for more and for longer periods of time. There is a lot of things that I could talk about, but the basics are the most important, as they are essential to developing your understanding of bikes. This is where I'll start by saying that there are different types of suspension that is designed for different types of riding. You might think that mountain biking is mountain biking, but there are a lot more disciplines when it comes to that. For example, you could be a cross-country racer where you want the lightweight stuff that's very efficient, or you want the downhill, which is the big travel, big hitting, massive suspension. So one thing that you have to keep in mind is that what sort of riding do you want? One key component is travel, and normally measured in millimeters is how much your suspension can compress. So the most you can get on the fork is about 200 millimeters, which is massive, and you get triple clamp forks that go all the way to your bars. And you can get cross-country suspension, which can be from maybe 80 to 100 millimeters of travel. Of course, there are other types, such as gravel suspension, which is maybe like 20 or 30 mil, but for most mountain biking, that's pretty much common. And also, you will also get different stanchion diameters, and so the bigger downhill forks, such as the RockShox Boxer Ultimates, they will have thicker stanchions, which are probably 40 millimeters, but the RockShox Lyric, on the other hand, which is a trail fork, will have 35 millimeter stanchions, as it doesn't have to be as stiff, and it can provide more compliance and less feedback to the rider. Different forks will have different characteristics depending on what you are looking for, and you should do your own research, as I can't tell you that there is one formula that works for every single rider. But a very good starting point when setting up your suspension is your sag, and this essentially is how much your body weight sags into the suspension. So there is different ways slightly to measure it, but the main one is to look at your manufacturer's website and look on the weight scale, depending on how much air pressure you have to put in the correct amount of air pressure. Sit on your suspension and push the O-ring all the way down to the seal. Then, if your percentage is put on a stanchion, such as in RockShox, you can work out from there, or you have to measure the suspension and see how much sag you have. For forks, a good percentage is about 20 to 30%. Shocks, maybe about 25 to 35%. It's probably a good, but check with your manufacturer, because it does depend from brand to brand. But I know that the reason why you clicked on this video in the first place is to find out what the actual suspension settings really mean, such as what is compression or rebound. Well, I'll explain it, but first we kind of have to understand how your fork works. There are two suspensions to suspension. First, you have your stiffness, and in modern forks this will be air, and in shocks you can get sometimes coil, but air is the most popular, most common one. You have stiffness and you have damping, and damping is a different characteristics. For example, rebound damping, which is normally red, and compression damping, which is normally blue. So in your fork you have two legs. You have your damper leg and you have your air leg. In one of them you put air pressure, which creates more stiffness, but in the other one you can change the dials to change different characteristics, which will alter how your suspension feels. There are some exceptions to this though, as forks such as from Öhlins have another air chamber, which you can put air in to add progression. And even though every fork can become more progressive, we will not focus on that today. I just want to get all the basic settings, such as what I've just stated in this video. But what do these settings actually do, you may ask? Well, for rebound, this is normally located at the bottom of your damper leg, and it does depend slightly on the manufacturer, but on the bottom of your leg there will be a lot of the time a red dial. It can be different colours depending on the brand, but Fox and RockShox, pretty common, it's just red. Even cheap Suntour forks, it's still red. And what this essentially does is that the more rebound damping you have, then the slower your fork will return. So it controls how fast the fork can return. So the less rebound, then the quicker your fork will return. So it does depend. It is nice to have a slow rebound, but you don't want your suspension to pack up and go deeper and deeper into the travel. So that's why the quicker side is probably better for most of the time. I think that a very good way to test this is to just open the rebound all the way. So sometimes there's like different animals under, like a hare or a turtle or something, and just put it on the faster side, or if there's a plus and a minus, put it on all the way minus, and just ride off some stuff. It can be like a foot high maybe, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, and from there just adjust to how you like it. You don't want it to be too fast because you don't want it to be jumping off of your bike when you decompress, but you do not want to be too slow, even though that feels nice. If you're deciding between a click, 1 or 2 either way, I'd say go to the faster side, because it'll feel a lot better and you will be faster compared to if you go to a slower side. And I know that speed isn't everything, but you really do not want to be crashing when you're out on the trails. And the second setting is compression damping, and this is essentially as it sounds, how much compression there is, so how much resistance there is to the fork or shock compressing. So the more compression you have, then the kind of stiffer the fork will feel. Like it will be harder to compress, and if you have less compression, then it'll be very plush and easy to compress with not much resistance there. So compression is basically resistance, and it's normally a blue dial. Obviously it can be different depending on the manufacturer of your fork or shock, but a lot of the times it's a blue dial, and sometimes it's labelled as a lockout, which it is on some forks, but the higher end ones is compression. And that's pretty much it. It's not as complicated as it probably seemed, and even though there are some more settings, which I won't get into this because, well, this is a basic tutorial on how suspension works, but there are high and low speed compression and rebound. And just to give a little background, all it basically means is depending on how fast your fork compresses. So it's a slow speed rebound. I mean, low speed compression will be when there is a lower speed compression, as in like your fork compresses slower. So this could be under braking or pumping, or a lot of the time it's to do with the rider. But high speed will be when the fork compresses quicker, and this could be, for example, like a big impact after a jump or a drop, and just high characteristics. You will find these on more expensive forks, as you do require a lot better dampers, which honestly cost a lot more, and for the average person probably aren't worth it. But it depends. Some people like it, some people don't. Personal preference, I suppose. I mean, if you had the choice, you're better off getting one. It's just nicer having the adjustability. But if you want the set and forget fork or shock, then honestly you don't need one. It's not an essential component.